And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this third day of May. Well, did you have a nice long weekend, the Labor Day weekend or the May Day weekend? And it's wonderful to have your company back today on this beautiful Brisbane day, sunny and 21 degrees. And it's wonderful to have your company today. Let's get into the news so that today we will be looking at, well, first of all, let's take a look at the weekend and the Labor Days.
Anthony Albanese will be hoping to use the momentum from yesterday's campaign launch.
The questions of just who Anthony Albanese is and what Labor stands for are questions that have dogged the opposition.
That's what it's about, valuing workers.
There has been a lot of hugging close to the government on a lot of policies like foreign policy and climate change, and a lot of talk about being a small target. But as we move into the pointy end of the election campaign, Labor seems to be returning to its roots.
I say this to the workers here. You deserve a government that wants to increase your pay.
May the best team win.
The campaign photo opportunities have continued. Yesterday, though, was Labor's big set-piece moment, its campaign launch.
You can choose a government that honours your values and rewards your hard work. A government that holds no one back and leaves no one behind.
The first half of the 2022 election campaign has been fought on the government's territory, the economy and national security and defence. But in the past few days, it has swung firmly into areas such as health that are traditionally Labor's domain.
Down by $10 on every single script. And more Australians will continue to get access to the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card.
Labor bettered the government's promise on the cost of medicines, and it matched the Seniors Health Card promise. But at its campaign launch yesterday, it moved to wrap some of its other signature policies in the comforting reassurance with which people regard Medicare.
Medicare will always be stronger under Labor. And if you vote Labor on the 21st of May, we will bring the principles of universal, affordable and quality service to childcare and to aged care.
But Labor's campaign launch was held at a time when the cost of living has become the focus of the campaign. Just 2 days before a crucial Reserve Bank board meeting may lift interest rates for the first time in 10 years, housing was inevitably going to be a big policy issue.
A Labor government will create a new Help to Buy program, a national shared equity scheme that will provide an equity contribution from the Commonwealth for 10,000 aspiring homeowners on low and middle incomes each and every year.
The scheme would provide low-income households with an equity contribution of up to 40% of the purchase price of a new home and up to 30% of the purchase price of an existing home. While much of the focus on home ownership inevitably falls on first home buyers, these are not necessarily the people who might benefit from the scheme.
The main beneficiaries of the shared equity scheme Labor's proposing, I think, would likely be older Australians. So people who have either bought a house and then lost it as part of a separation or never managed to buy in the first place.
Earlier this year, the Grattan Institute's Brendan Coates advocated a scheme very like the one now being spruiked by Labor. The Prime Minister, however, is not a fan.
What Labor have been very clear about is they have a share in your home, and so as your home value increases, they're making money off you.
The purchaser is still getting the capital gain on the extra 60-70% of the home that they own outright at the start.
The government points to its policies designed to cut the cost of mortgage insurance and help people save for a home. But Labor says it will also keep these measures, which help people further up the income scale. The big difference that now sits between the two parties is a policy that Labor actually announced some time ago, a pledge to set up a $10 billion social housing fund which would aim to build 30,000 homes from the earnings of the fund, with special allocations for women and children escaping domestic violence and for essential workers who can't afford to live near their workplaces.
Our Housing Australia Future Fund will build 20,000 new social housing units and 10,000 affordable homes for essential workers in the next 5 years.
In Australia, the proportion of social housing is estimated to have fallen from over 7% in the early 1990s to just 4% in 2019. A constant in Anthony Albanese's origin story has been the story of growing up with his single mum in public housing and the security it offered them. So it was perhaps fitting the issue was at the centre of his bid for office yesterday. Tomorrow, many Australians will be anxiously waiting to find out what happens to their mortgage payments and their property values as the Reserve Bank Board meets. But for others, higher interest rates will only sharpen their need for government interventions in the housing market. The Prime Minister has a simple message for voters about tomorrow's RBA decision, whatever it is.
So tomorrow, it's not about me, it's not about Mr Albanese, it's not about what it means for politics.
Scott Morrison has to hope that this is right and that an interest rate rise does not act to bring the election back to being a referendum on his government, no matter what the cause of higher rates. Labor is hoping that's exactly what will happen.
We have the worst inflation rate in 2 decades. Families are struggling, worried about the future. Yet Scott Morrison just keeps on scrambling from one photo op to another, boasting that the Australian people know who he is. Well, he's got that right. They don't think, they know.
Well, on the campaign trail, and that's Anthony Albanese there. Well, right now, let's take a look at what's going to happen today. So today is that day RBA is sitting today. So in a decade, the interest rate has been at a record low, and it's inevitable that it will go up. And what a timing! What a timing! Unfortunately for the coalition, but probably on the winning side for Labor on their policies. Well, right now, let's take a look at RBA and its shadow board, see what they have to say.
Nassim Hanem there. So, will they or won't they? That's the question on everyone's lips regarding tomorrow's rate decision from the RBA. James Morley is a member of the RBA Shadow Board, a group of macroeconomists who are unrelated to the Reserve Bank, but offer policy recommendations the day before the official decision. Today, they changed their tune on rates.
What's notable about this meeting, today's meeting, prior to, of course, the real RBA's meeting tomorrow, is that for the first time in a long, long time, there's a higher recommendation by the Shadow Board to raise the rate than to keep it steady. Although it is close. It is a 53% recommendation to raise rates and 47% to keep it steady.
Well, James, we know that the RBA has been keen to wait for wages numbers to make a decision on rates, but inflationary pressures are building. What options does the RBA have?
Well, I think there's 3 possible outcomes of what they could do tomorrow. One is that they would hold fire, hold steady, but signal verbally, with Phil Lowe's statement, that they are likely to start the raising cycle with the June meeting. Another is that they could raise rates just a little bit from, it's currently at 10 basis points. They could raise it up to 25 basis points, which is not, particularly large change in interest rates. Or the other is that they could make a big splash, if you will, and raise, say, to 50 basis points, which is a more substantial change. But I think, the recommendation of the Shadow Board was just marginally in favor of raising rates. I think it's likely that they will stick to this idea. They want to see what the wage pressures are to justify starting the raising cycle.
Well, the housing market will be at the forefront of the RBA's mind. We know just how geared some Australian homeowners are, as we've just seen in the recent story. What risks do a rate rise, or does a rate rise tomorrow pose for that sector and others? Well,
a rise of rates of just 15 basis points, say from 10 basis points to 25 basis points, is not likely to, in and of itself, be materially important for much, really. It's more the path of the policy rate going forward over the coming months in the year. And in reality, I think whether or not the RBA moves tomorrow or they wait until, say, the June meeting, banks are going to probably move ahead in anticipation of a higher future cash rate and start raising rates. So I don't think the decision by the RBA will determine that, but definitely, higher mortgage rates will have an impact on household spending decisions going forward.
If we can take a more global perspective now, the Singapore Prime Minister is the latest to warn of a global recession in the next 2 years. The Fed, as we know, is looking to aggressively tighten. There's talk that they might raise rates by 50 to 75 basis points this week. The Russia war in Ukraine is dampening the outlook. Just how likely is a recession in your opinion?
Well, I think actually just looking at least imminently for Australia, a recession seems very unlikely. The biggest indication of there being a recession is when, of course, the unemployment rate rises quite dramatically. And the unemployment rate in Australia is 4%.
So with the unemployment rate, and as per his observation, a recession is highly unlikely. Well, I hope that he is right with that. Well, we'll just have to wait till later today to find out about what actually is happening with the interest rate. But right now, let's go back to this battlefield and the federal electorate of Brisbane, see what's happening here.
This is a part of Queensland that belies the stereotype. The powerhouse markets are in the heart of the inner city seat of Brisbane, where Liberal moderate and Assistant Minister for Waste Reduction Trevor Evans is seeking a third term.
I'm loving all the messaging, it's positive.
Yeah. The job of an MP is to be a good representative for their area, and I feel in many ways that I have been a good representative for this area.
Good morning, how are you? That's good.
Arguably his main competitor is businesswoman and Labor candidate Madonna Jarrett.
Oh, good on you, thank you.
Thank you, good luck.
I really appreciate it, thank you. What I'm up against is the fact that the people of Brisbane have been left behind by Scott Morrison and the LNP.
And there's a third element in this part of Queensland that also goes against the stereotype. Relatively strong support for the Greens.
We want a safe climate for them to grow up in.
Yeah, definitely. We're running to win this seat. We're not running to pressure anyone else or to try and get Labor to be more progressive. We're running to represent the community in this seat.
While most of Queensland swung sharply to the LNP in 2019, 3 Brisbane seats bucked that trend. Ryan, Griffith and Brisbane all recorded a primary Greens vote of more than 20%. To what extent is the support for the Greens in this seat a sign of dissatisfaction with what Labor has to offer?
Can I tell you, I've got my eye on one prize, and that's winning this seat for Anthony Albanese and Labor. That's what really matters.
Why do you think there's this growing interest in the Greens?
What there is a growing interest in why Scott Morrison has let people down.
The Greens in Brisbane came within a whisker of matching Labor's primary vote in 2019. And the party is hoping it can better that result with a focus once again on climate change.
We've knocked on thousands of doors, talked on the phones to thousands of voters, and climate change in Brisbane is by far and away the biggest issue that voters bring up with us completely unprompted.
Climate change continues to divide the coalition, with Queensland National Party figures speaking out against the government's net zero policies. Does that very public division within the coalition over climate change make it more difficult for you in this electorate?
I think people are shocked to hear that the other parties don't allow that sort of public dissent. The coalition is the only side of politics that allows MPs to cross the floor and to have conscience votes in many instances. And while at times that can appear messy, it also means that we're probably the party that's best able to continue to keep a majority of Australians together going forward.
Trevor Evans has also been promoting other environmental credentials, in particular his commitment to recycling, sending out a glossy flyer with a distinctive green cover. Is that your attempt to appeal to would-be Green voters?
My branding has been like that for a number of years now, I guess.
So a little bit green?
Absolutely.
The election comes in the aftermath of major flooding, which affected just about every suburb in the Brisbane electorate. And although the Prime Minister made a personal visit during the clean-up, he later got caught up in a dispute with the state government over additional disaster relief funding.
I think we've seen over some time now a real politicisation, and it's very unfortunate, a real politicisation of natural disasters.
The federal government later backed down.
I'm very, very pleased that the Prime Minister was able to listen to myself and some of my other colleagues here in South East Queensland and has been able to come to the party and provide some very significant co-funding that will make a difference to the rebuilding efforts here in Brisbane.
Morrison had to be dragged kicking and screaming to actually come in and provide that flood recovery aid, and then when that flood recovery came, it was a third of what those south of the border got.
Flood disaster assistance remains an important issue in this low-lying part of Brisbane, where the clean-up has been a long, hard slog. But for Milton business owner Marcus Neeson, the politics of recovery funding leaves him cold.
So it's not going to really affect your vote either way? I would like to vote for myself, to be honest. I reckon in 12 months I'd have the whole joint sorted out, seriously.
Do you think there's a change in the wind?
Hard to say.
This political disengagement with the major parties was also evident at the Merthyr Croquet Club. Alistair Kelsey is so disillusioned, he even joined a minor party with a focus on integrity issues. It's called Federal ICAC now.
Given the fact that the Prime Minister has ruled out a federal ICAC, are you leaning more towards Labor?
If the Labor policy, and I haven't read it, but if the Labor policy was more open to introducing an ICAC, yes, I would lean more towards Labor.
And what about the Greens?
Yeah, look, I saw Adam Bandt the other night Google it, mate, and actually that impressed me, the fact that he was trying to bring it back onto politicians having to have good ideas.
Brisbane is by no means the LNP's most marginal seat, with Labor needing a swing of 4.9%. But it's an electorate that's more sensitive than most to issues like climate change and integrity. And if the mood at the powerhouse markets is any guide, a lot of the electorate has either yet to engage or is only just now starting to pay attention.
Have you been following the federal election?
For me personally, anyone who backs environmental friendliness, who backs, I guess, resourcefulness, I'm for them. So,
and
yeah.
Who's doing the best job to convince you so far? Labor, Liberal, or the Greens?
Liberal, yeah.
Which side impresses you the most?
Hard to say. I think I'm back in Elbow at the moment.
For Labor, it's a test of how much progress the party has made federally in Queensland since its dismal 2019 campaign.
If they want real action on climate change, if they want accountability, that's what Labor can offer the people of Brisbane.
Moving on, I'd like to just let you know that we will be bringing some of the candidates right here in the studio. The first one to come is Raj Guruswamy. Now, Raj Guruswamy, if you have not heard of him, he's joined second in rank to Pauline Hanson for One Nation Party. Now, people would like to say that, Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party has always been branded a racist party. And now, the second in charge there, he's become Raj Guruswamy. So why and how did that happen? Find out all that. And I think that will be next Monday at 10 a.m. when he will be here in the studio live. So that's something to look forward to, and there will be other ones. Before we go to our daily India report, let's take a look at what's happening in Ukraine.
Here in Dnipro and in cities across Ukraine, people are feeling the effects of Russia's attacks, even if they haven't been directly caught up in them. The fuel situation here is really getting quite bad. Some people here are limited to just 5 litres at a time when they fill up, due to the rationing that's going on. Russia's not only slowed down supplies, it's hit a major refinery last week too. So there are big lines in some places, including in the capital Kyiv. And of course that risks slowing down supplies to the military as well. But Ukraine has had some military gains of its own. The armed forces have released a video that they say shows 2 Russian patrol boats being destroyed in the Black Sea. The weapon of choice was a Turkish-made Bayraktar drone, which Ukraine has been using with quite devastating consequences during this war. Elsewhere, the evacuation of civilians from Mariupol has stalled again today, while a convoy from the Azovstal steel plant has made progress heading towards Zaporizhzhia. Local officials say that others from the city itself have been delayed. The people who have made it out have some pretty harrowing stories about their time underground.
For a month, 40 of us had to share 6 tins of food. We boiled 2 buckets of soup out of them, and that was our only meal for the whole day. We were assured that there was a bomb shelter there, a well-constructed one. We thought it would only be for 2 or 3 days, but we've been here since February 24th.
There are still hundreds of civilians trapped there, and local officials say shelling of that area has begun again, so it could be a long time before everyone is safely out of that plant, if indeed they make it out at all.
And that is a very, very grave situation still, and not a lot of progress that has been made there. Well, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. In our first story, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarks on an official foreign visit to Germany, Denmark and France from 2nd to 4th May. This will be PM Modi's first visit abroad in 2022. Let's take a look at what is on the cards in his Europe visit. Indian officials said that PM Modi's 3-day visit to Germany, Denmark and France is aimed at further strengthening bilateral cooperation. The Ministry of External Affairs said the Prime Minister will first travel to Germany, then visit Denmark and will have a brief stopover in Paris on his return journey on May 4th. Ahead of his trip to Berlin, Copenhagen and Paris, PM has said that his visit to Europe comes at a time when the region faces many challenges and choices. In Berlin, Prime Minister will hold bilateral talks with Olaf Scholz, Federal Chancellor of Germany, and the 2 leaders will co-chair the 6th edition of the India-Germany Intergovernmental Consultations. He will also address and interact with the Indian community in Germany.
The visit of the Honourable Prime Minister to Berlin on the 2nd and 3rd of this month for the India-Germany Intergovernmental Consultations is a landmark visit. This year we not only celebrate the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we also commemorate 70 years of establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Germany. It's been over 20 years since we have established a strategic partnership with Germany, and the IGC format provides an opportunity for our 2 leaders of India and Germany and their ministerial colleagues to review all elements of our strategic partnership, to review the progress done so far, and to be able to chart the future roadmap. The Prime Minister, during his visit, will be exploring the new dimensions of green and sustainable development partnership in Germany so that our scientific, technological, and business and industry establishments can get together to develop the technological means for both countries to reach their climate commitments made at Glasgow.
Prime Minister Modi will thereafter travel to Copenhagen on an official visit at the invitation of Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen. He will also participate in the 2nd India-Nordic Summit being hosted by Denmark. During the visit, he will attend an India-Denmark Business Forum and will also address members of the Indian diaspora. On his return journey on May 4th, Prime Minister will briefly stop over in Paris and meet Emmanuel Macron, the President of France. This holds relevance as India and France are celebrating 75 years of their diplomatic relations this year. India continues to closely monitor the COVID cases as it fears another wave. The rising cases have raised eyebrows, but there hasn't been a rise in deaths. On 1st May, India reported 3,157 new COVID-19 cases. According to the Union Health Ministry, the active cases increased to 19,500. The country also reported 40 COVID-related deaths on May 1st, bringing the total number of COVID fatalities to 5,23,843. 1.89 billion vaccine doses have been administered so far under the nationwide vaccination drive. Amid fresh COVID-19 concerns, Karnataka government on 30th April instructed officials to initiate surveillance measures for those arriving from Japan and Thailand, including RT-PCR tests for symptomatic cases at the airport testing laboratory. Scorching heat envelops North India. This is an unprecedented heat spell, but there is relief in sight as the Indian Meteorological Department has said that the heat wave is likely to abate over Delhi and adjoining parts of northwest and central India from today. India has been reeling under the intense heat wave conditions for the past few weeks. Northwest and central India experienced the hottest April in 122 years, with average maximum temperatures touching 35.9 degrees Celsius and 37.78 degrees Celsius respectively. The Weather Office has predicted partly cloudy sky with the possibility of thunder at isolated places over Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, East Rajasthan and parts of Uttar Pradesh from May 2nd. This is likely to give some respite to residents from the scorching heat. Whereas the heat wave would abate over Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Telangana and West Rajasthan from May 3rd. India's unemployment rate rises to 7.83% in April. Let's take a look at the data from the Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy. India's graduates struggle to find jobs suitable to their degrees as India's unemployment rate rose to 7.83% in April from 7.60% in March. The data is released by the Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy. The data showed that the urban unemployment rate rose to 9.22% in April from 8.28% the previous month, while the rural unemployment rate slipped to 7.18% from 7.29%. The highest unemployment rate of 34.5% was recorded in the northern state of Haryana, followed by 28.8% in Rajasthan. Economists say job opportunities have been hit by the sluggish domestic demand and the slow pace of economic recovery amid rising prices. Preparations are underway across India to celebrate the Muslim religious festival of Eid on May 3rd. Eid rush was spotted in markets across India ahead of the festival as women get their hands dyed with henna and buy new clothes and jewellery. Sivaya sale has been dominating the markets as shoppers flock to purchase. People are in a mood to celebrate as COVID cases remain small in number. The crescent moon for the Islamic month of Shawwal was not sighted on Sunday 1st May evening. Therefore, the clerics across the country announced that the festival of Eid ul-Fitr will be celebrated in India on 3rd May. Ramzan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which involves rigorous fasting for about 30 days. Eid ul-Fitr is celebrated by Muslims across the globe to mark the end of the Islamic holy month of Ramzan. Ramzan is observed by Muslims worldwide as a month of fasting to commemorate the first revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad according to the Islamic belief. India has launched an open network for digital commerce as the government tries to end the dominance of US companies in the fast-growing e-commerce market. This action comes a day after it raided domestic sellers of Amazon.com and Walmart.
India on April 29th launched its own open network for digital commerce. The Indian government objective is to end the dominance of US companies in the fast-growing e-commerce market. The launch of the platform comes after India's antitrust body on April 28th raided domestic sellers of Amazon and some of Walmart's Flipkart following accusations of competition law violation. Indian retailers have long contended that Amazon and Flipkart's platforms benefit a few big sellers via predatory pricing, though the companies say they comply with all Indian laws. The government's so-called ONDC platform will allow buyers and sellers to connect and transact with each other online, no matter what other application they use. It was soft launched on April 29th to be expanded later. A government document said that two large multinational players controlled more than half of the country's e-commerce trade. limiting access to the market, giving preferential treatment to some sellers and squeezing supplier margins. It did not name the companies though. The document said India's ONDC plan aimed to onboard 30 million sellers and 10 million merchants online. The plan is to cover at least 100 cities and towns by August this year. It would focus on apps in local languages for both buyers and sellers, with a special emphasis on small merchants and rural consumers, the document said about the project. The government said it had already received support from retailers and venture capital firms. Lenders such as the State Bank of India, ICICI Bank and Bank of Baroda have already committed total investments of 46.2 million Singapore dollars into ONDC.
Another Bollywood film is becoming a global hit and has crossed a whopping Rs 1,000 crores at the box office. KGF Chapter 2 has not been marred by any other new releases during the last 2 weeks.
मैं तुम्हारा सब कुछ छीन लूंगी.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in that segment. But right now, before we finish off, we will go to the functions and events. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in and being with us on this Saturday. Until tomorrow, it is goodbye from us. But don't forget that tomorrow we will also have the real estate update with Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. And we have quite a few interviews lined up later throughout the week. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.